Hi, I'm Bob Nordyke, Senior Advisor at Patari Evidence, and I'd like to walk you through our poster titled, What Proportion of Total Value Generated by New Drugs Accrues to Manufacturers? This review looked at the literature on producer surplus, and our aims were to both understand the distributional results from these studies and also to parse the methodology supporting the estimates, as this is a pretty complex issue with important implications for our understanding of the overall societal benefits of pharmaceutical innovation. This assessment began as a small part of a larger project on dynamic efficiency of the pharmaceutical industry, which gets at how well we're balancing access to innovations today versus R&D investments, which in turn produce innovations in the future. The proportion of total societal benefits that manufacturers receive as a result of their innovations is an important part of that argument. And as it turns out, the producer surplus literature is pretty interesting in its own right. Our poster begins with a brief overview of the included studies. There were 16 total studies, which provided 43 unique empirical estimates of producer surplus. Just over half of those were from the US, just over a third were from the UK, and the remainder were from other countries. Table 1 jumps into the core of our findings related to the analytic methods used. There, we use two main dimensions to classify the included studies. First dimension is how these studies operationalize consumer surplus. 10 of the studies looked only at health surplus, the straightforward mortality and morbidity improvements and health resource utilization benefits. 4 studies included work productivity in addition to that health surplus. And only 2 of the 16 studies attempted to estimate consumer surplus from an overall societal perspective. The other key dimension is how the studies operationalized producer surplus. 10 of the 16 studies based their estimates of producer surplus on total drug expenditures, or list prices, and nearly all of these studies were from the US, where the departure from list prices and net prices, or true net revenues to manufacturers, can differ substantially. 6 of the studies then looked at effectively net price, but only one of those is from the US. Putting these two dimensions together then, there was only one out of the 16 studies that estimates both a societal measure of consumer surplus as well as a true net revenue-based producer surplus estimate. Table 2 then provides a stratification of the empirical estimates of producer surplus by a number of common study characteristics. This table also highlights another methodological quirk of one of the studies where they double counted drug expenditures, which were of course included in the producer surplus estimate as a measure of revenue to manufacturers. But those same drug expenditures were also deducted from the measure of consumer surplus, and this was done to capture strict rationing in a constrained healthcare system. But as a result of this double counting, that study has estimates of producer surplus that are several times higher than the other studies. And you'll see in figure 1 that the uniqueness of this particular study plays out where there's essentially 2 populations of estimates. There's one distribution from Woods et al., 2021, and a second distribution from the other 15 studies. Now, the heterogeneity of methods and wide range of estimated producer surplus is a real concern in that this literature has very little use from a public policy perspective, and we need to do much better. We need to develop more consistent consensus methods to evaluate the share of total surplus that is captured by drug manufacturers. And ideally, we would like to see these methods that can estimate how much of the total societal value is captured by innovators versus that captured by manufacturers after loss of exclusivity. Our main conclusions hinge on the heterogeneity of methods in this body of literature. Most empirical studies of producer surplus have failed to account for the full range of societal benefits arising from drug innovations, and most studies don't accurately account for true net manufacturer revenues. And so effectively what they're doing is estimating the surplus accruing to the entire pharmaceutical supply chain, not innovative manufacturers alone. Most of the discussions of this literature that we've found tend to focus on the estimates themselves, whether producer surplus is too high or too low. What we'd like folks to focus on right now are the methods underlying these types of studies. Understanding the total societal value of drug innovation and what proportion of that value accrues to drug manufacturers is a really important question, particularly when it comes to pricing discussions and how we can achieve dynamic efficiency in the pharmaceutical industry. Producer surplus is central to many of those discussions, and we believe that to better inform those discussions, we need much better estimates of producer surplus. Glad to take any of your questions. Thank you for your time.